Yo, servus aus Berlin. Hi, my name is Matthias Rillig, and today I'll talk about how to write an effective research plan. Now, you need research plans for all kinds of purposes. For example, when you want to apply for a scholarship for your PhD or for a fellowship for your postdoc, you need to write research plans, and there's all kinds of other additional requirements and specifics that we're not going to cover here, but all of those have in common that you need a good, effective research plan. And so here are the main points. Some of them are quite obvious and common sense, and others will probably be slightly less intuitive. So the first thing is you need to, of course, explain the general background of your research question, explain why it's a significant research question and interesting and topical. And for that you need to cite the more broader scientific literature, also to show that you have command of that broader literature. And for broader literature, what you cite in terms of references are book chapters or review paper types, not specific papers. The second point is then you derive your more specific topic, justifying why you wanted to ask this particular question, and for that you need to take the reader or reviewer by the hand and derive the particular question, and in doing so then you need to cite more specific literature, so primary literature papers, to make sure that you are aware of what's currently going on in that particular field of inquiry. Next, you need to describe the work packages, so the different bits of the work, for example, for your postdoc or for your PhD, that are neat little subdivisions of your overall question. And for that, it's important that for each of those experiments, observational studies in our field in ecology, anyway, that you give as precise a statement for the experimental design as possible. So for example, this is a so by so factorial design with the factor such and the levels this and that, and I will use so and so many replicates, and then give pertinent references for the methods that you're going to be using. So that's important, that you give very precise statements for the design of the experiments that you're going to be doing. Now, one point that's slightly less obvious: as you put these work packages together, you need to make sure that they don't come across like a grab bag of various things that you thought of and kind of thought were interesting. Now, in order for a research plan to be really compelling, what you need to achieve is convince the reader or reviewer that those are all necessary parts, that there is a broader space of things from which you could pick, and then after careful scrutiny, those are the work packages that you specifically chose to address in this particular research. That's very important because these things shouldn't be coming across as arbitrary, these work package selections, but as very clearly justified, necessary pieces that overall fit together into a bigger whole. And so very often what people underestimate is the effort that goes into tying all these work packages really together into this overall real project. And everybody is different in how they come up with these kinds of plans. I always draw a figure, also mostly for most review papers, or even for bigger grant proposals, I always try to draw a figure so I can explain to myself how all the different components of this research fit together, how they correspond with each other. And then as you draw a figure, sometimes you may realize, well, this part doesn't really fit in here, and maybe I should get rid of it, or I'm really having a gap here, a logical gap. So however you want to do that, but in the end, I think it is a tremendous advantage, and getting increasingly almost a requirement, I think, to produce a very attractive, clear conceptual figure. And don't underestimate the effort that goes in the production of such a figure, but it's definitely worth it, because a very compelling, nicely done conceptual figure that seems well thought out, and where parts of the conceptual figure correspond clearly to the parts of your work packages, ideally by pointing them even out, that effort is definitely not wasted. I mean, that is an eye catcher for the reviewer, and I think it will help a lot getting your proposal funded. So don't underestimate the importance of producing a very good conceptual figure that is really pertinent to your problem, not just a general figure of the research field, but really a custom-made conceptual figure that fits precisely your research plan. I think it's super important. Also, one part that people tend to neglect is they have a beautiful research outline, they have very nicely described work packages, but then what's missing is how do specific outcomes or results from these work packages feed back into the question that you asked. Sometimes it's just a very simple sentence, for example, well, if we find an interaction between factor A and B in our experiment, then that means that our hypothesis A is being supported. Or if we see a difference in between this treatment combination and that treatment combination, it means this and that. But very often that link appears to be missing, so people write very nice rationales for what they are doing. Then they give very good descriptions of the work packages, but then they miss that bit how from this experiment now, what does that really mean for the question you were asking in the first place? And sometimes that is not as obvious as you might think for somebody who reads your proposal. Yeah, and then finally, usually it's also required by the different funders, but it is important to give a sense of the time that you need for all of these work packages to be completed, and it should be a realistic time plan, of course. So give the reader a sense of how long you think every one of these steps takes, because one of the important criteria for evaluating a proposal is, can it be done in the time allotted, or is it a completely unrealistic amount of work, or is it not enough work to even for a PhD? So don't underestimate the time schedule at the end, and you can make usually a very simple chart. It doesn't have to be complicated, as long as the information is all there. So to recap the major points, explain the background in the beginning, so the broader literature. Derive your questions and main hypothesis, citing more specific literature. Describe your work packages and be as detailed and as specific as you can, especially about the design components. Make sure all the parts of the work packages are contributing specifically and necessarily to the overall progress, because it should not look like a grab bag of stuff you came up with. Tie everything together, clarify the logical connection among components. Using a simple conceptual figure, an attractive figure can really raise the level of your application. Explain clearly how the outcome of the experiments and studies relates back specifically to your questions, ideally even stating expected results and statistical tests that you will be using. And in the end, give a timetable that links the tasks to the timeline for your project of the PhD or the postdoc. And I think if you pay attention to all that, your research proposal will have a much higher chance of being successful. Good luck. Hi there. If you like this video, don't forget to click like down there, and also remember to subscribe to the channel and feel free to leave comments. See ya!